I'm not sure if you guys saw this article, but this is just recent. This is from The Hill. It says Tyree Nichols' parents accept invitation to attend State of the Union.
I saw that too.
Oh yeah, they're gonna milk that.
So this is what I like to call using our pain, our plight for political points to keep the masses pacified so that we do not revolt against a tyrannical government. And so this is what I see constantly.
Yes.
And while I know that it happens, in the white, the white community, it happens especially in the Black community because we're constantly being told, yes, you're disenfranchised, yes, you're vilified, and yes, your lives matter too. And then we go, can we take some of that money from the police and put it into our housing, education, and healthcare? Oh, but I'm sorry. No, I wish I could, but unfortunately, we need the police in order to keep you safe. See?
Well, I'm glad you said it because I would have had to take a risk and say that myself if you didn't. So I'm glad you did. But this is why, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass here, but this is why channels like yours and channels like RBN are so important because you have a credibility on this that Russell and I don't and can't, right?
Yeah.
And so it has to come from those places, and I mean, so that's a point that that's a point that's really important to make as often and as loudly as you can.
Well, and especially because the people of color that they platform are people of color who are in line with their agenda. And they will use that to claim that clearly we are on the side of people of color because they support us. Look at all of these people. Look at Kamala. Look at Barack. Look at Ta-Nehisi Coates. Look at all of these people we have supporting us from that community.
Look at James Clyburn, who just brought everybody with him. Everybody with him. Yeah.
If you don't support us, you are ignoring the voices of Black people. I have a friend from the Black community who is very upper middle, who took exception to a show that we did about the Fred Hampton documentary that was on Netflix. Not fictionalized movie. What was it called?
It was a movie. It was Judas and
the Black Messiah. Took exception to our segment on it. And I went back and watched it after she said that. Like, did we say anything out of line? No, we reflected Fred Hampton's views. And those views are anathema to the establishment. The idea of bringing poor whites on board and getting together. There's a great book, White Trash, that is about the history of poor whites in America. And the modern Democratic Party, going back to the indentured servants, the modern Democratic Party are the inheritors of that white aristocracy that always held poor whites in disdain and always made sure that blacks and whites did not get together along class lines. Now, the way that they used to do it was by stirring up the hatred in whites against black people and promising them some kind of an elevation. You can't do it that way anymore. So now they're doing it. Now they're doing it from the other side. Now it's the focus is on hating the poor whites in the trailer. Oh, these people, they're all racists. They're all monsters. They're all deplorables. And you can use that to drum up support for anything. We saw that during Schmovid, right? Where they threw all this up. Those are the people. Those are the only people who think this way. And they're white. They're white and they're poor and they're guns and they're God, right? They're playing the same old game they've been playing in this country for centuries. They're just doing it with a new face.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. I said this, and some people, especially liberals, especially a lot of black liberals, would probably have something to say about this. I even have families that are black liberals, but I said black people in both parties are just diversity hires made to make you accept anti-black policies while they rhetorically say they support us. It's all optics.
That's it. That's it.
And basically, if you are black and if you're in a Republican Party, you're a diversity hire. If you're black and you're in the Democratic Party, you're a diversity hire. If you're gay or trans or disabled in either party, you are a diversity hire. And because you are, they really don't give a crap about you, about your liberation. When I talk about liberation, I talk a lot about black liberation, queer liberation, but there's also liberation that is needed for poor whites because they are constantly under the thumb. They have the boot. The boot is constantly on their necks as well. And I did a TikTok yesterday, I think it was. It got like over 7,000 views already, which I'm completely surprised about. But a young lady was saying, what is the end game for capitalism? And I said, slavery. Slavery is the fulfillment and end game of capitalism.
Right.
The one thing that people don't want to hear, though, is that number one, people who look like me, they're trying to put us back into slavery, back into chattel slavery. But another piece that people aren't realizing is that they want people who look like you, Russell, and you like Heaton, also into chattel slavery. They're not just satisfied with black people being put into chattel slavery. So now there's over 60+% of people out there that also can be subservient to the oligarchs. So they want you all to also be chattel slaves as well. And so that's the fulfillment of capitalism, because we're the canaries in the coal mine. After they put us back, guess what? Guess who they're coming after? They're coming after all of you.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think they're coming at us all at once. In some ways, not obviously, but in some ways they are. I agree with that. Right? I mean, look, this is the inevitable. I mean, you know, Russell and I recorded one of our like Patreon only segments earlier where we sort of raised this point where it's like, in an economy where you make everything for sale, if everything is for sale, that means inevitably, and Marx talked about this himself, political power will become for sale. And once political power is for sale, what you will inevitably have is a partnering of corporations and the state itself. And once that train gets cooking at a certain speed, you're right, the only thing that will stop it is an actual revolution. Yes. That's the only thing capable of stopping it. I'm sorry to bust the bubbles of Jordan Chariton, Crystal Ball, and the counter-revolutionary white left PMC network, but Marianne Williamson is not going to stop that train. And that's the situation that you're in, and it's a situation that we have put ourselves in over the past several decades, to the point where, and you know, Jay, you made this point a while back, by the time you realize it, it is too late. It is too late. It's certainly too late to be solved through any sort of, you know, nice guy electoral solution, right? I mean, it's just, this thing has accrued too much momentum already. It's moving too fast. It's destroying everything in its path. That is, of course, inevitable. It's inevitable, whether it's by design or not. You know, did Adam Smith have this in mind? Probably not. But guys like that, thinkers like that who exist today, lack the foresight to understand the very, very simple calculus that if everything is for sale, it means anyone who can afford to buy it can afford to buy more of it and more of it and more of it, and they start accruing it exponentially to the point where, before you know it, it's very easy for them to, virtually speaking, practically speaking, or perhaps even further down the road, literally speaking, enslave most of the population. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's math. It's simple math.
Yeah, basically.
Well, that's and that's why I touched on the technology.
Yeah.
When Orwell was writing, and when Huxley was writing, the things that those are usually kind of considered these, you know, kind of balancing visions of what kind of dystopia we would be most likely to create. And when they wrote those visions, the technology to realize that world wasn't there. It is now. It is now. We do have the technology for Big Brother to watch you. And we also have the technology to endlessly amuse people into a constant state of ignorance. I would say what we ended up with and what we're ending up with is some of column A and some of column B. That in the security state, in the surveillance state, you have the Orwell element. In the way that we have to be very careful what we say on YouTube, you have the Orwell element. And in the way the whole society is oriented around, oh, season 3 of The Witcher is coming out. Oh my God, I got to watch that. Everyone's got their streaming services and they're just constantly oriented around pleasure and distraction. That is much more that Huxley vision. And in the end, you're going to wind up with a kind of fascism that most people don't notice they're living in. Just as that's something that always strikes me in dystopian films, that the people living in dystopia don't know they're living in dystopia. You know, most people don't have that kind of detachment, the ability to have that kind of detachment from the society that they're living in. For example, living in Harlem during the Bloomberg years, I would walk outside and I would see black men up against the wall who I knew in the neighborhood being frisked for no reason, supers, guys working in the buildings for no good reason at all. And it reminded me of years ago, Oliver Stone did a mini series of a kind of dystopian future LA called Wild Palms. And one of the things that always stayed with me about it that I thought was very smart was people would just be doing their LA thing and you would just see people getting thrown into tinted window SUVs in the background. And people just didn't really pay attention to it. They were just kind of accustomed to that because that's the world that they live in. That's what that is. That's dystopian. That police going around and randomly grabbing people. But people will get used to just about anything. If you look at the history of revolutions, and this is something to temper expectations. I don't want to black pill people. I don't want to be nihilistic. But if you look at where there have been revolutions, look how desperate people's circumstances were before they were willing to go and have a revolution. That's how bad things have to be. A friend of mine once said there's never been a revolution in a country with air conditioning. Now, that's not strictly speaking true, but his point is well taken. The more you are able to give people cheap consumer goods, and this is part of why we maintain all of these military bases. You know, people are always saying, why do we do this? It's not a mystery. Yes, it's partly enriching the defense contractors, but it is also controlling the resources and economy of the world in order to keep our own population pacified with the things that we're stealing from everybody else, including their cheap labor, so that you can get your cheap amusements here. Because once those things go away, then you might have a revolution.
Absolutely. And if I could just make one quick point here, because I know you brought up that image of, I guess, the robot dogs or something, you know, you're going to play a video or something, but it doesn't even have to be that conceptual.
Is that Black Mirror? That image?
No, that was actually real.
Okay, well, look,
damn.
that, I mean, yes, that is real, but when we talk about just sort of runaway capitalism inevitably creating, you know, this just, you know, servant class that could eventually, yes, become a slave class. I drove for Uber since 2017. I don't drive passengers anymore. Now I do food. I do DoorDash, Grubhub, and stuff, which are actually far better than Uber. But anyway, I won't bore the audience with that. When you drive Uber wants every driver to accept every ride. That's how they make money. They want you to accept every ride. Mm-hmm. the key to making any money at all with Uber, and you can do fairly well if you know how to do it, but you have to know how to do it. You have to reject most ride requests, because if you accept a ride request from a passenger who's 15 minutes away, you don't get paid for the 15 minutes you spend driving to pick them up. You only get paid when they're in the car. So if Uber had its way with you, you would lose money driving for Uber. If you did it the way they wanted, which is every time you get that ping, you say, sure, I'll take this ride, you will absolutely kill your car and lose money. You will spend more on car bills and gas than you will. So this is already a situation where you don't need the robot dogs. The person is the robot dog, unless they know enough not to take every ride. Like, if you don't learn the tricks of the trade, if you don't learn how to beat the system, how to beat the app, that app will use you the way whatever company that is using those robots. They chew you up, they spit you out. You will lose money doing it unless you learn how to. And they will never teach you how to. You have to learn that on your own. It's not in their interest to teach you how to. They want every driver to take every ride because that's how things move as quickly and seamlessly as they can. So they'll do this thing where they'll give every driver an acceptance rate, and they'll send you these bullshit texts and emails. Keep your acceptance rate high. If your acceptance rate is high, not only are you not making any money, you're losing money for them. You are depleting your net worth by driving Uber full time if you do it the way they want you to. That is an example. That is an example, because somebody wrote in the chat, this was a way back, gig slavery or something like that was the comment. And that's what triggered me to say that, because yes, these gig economies will use you as if you are a machine, if you let them. And more people are turning to gig work. I do gig work myself now. My current acceptance rating on DoorDash is like 20%. Most of the orders that come in are not worth doing. You have to know how to turn them down. Anyway, I'm not going to get soapboxy about that, but that's just an example of how, yes, capitalism, and especially tech capitalism, the people who run Uber have created a transportation empire. They have never bought a gallon of gas. The drivers buy the gas, you know? I mean, if that is not, I mean, they are using people as if they are machines. Yep.
Russell?
Whenever you work inside a corporation, which I have very rarely done for that reason, it's creepy. It's creepy because you can tell that they got a bunch of industrial psychologists together to figure out how to get the maximum amount of labor out of you with the minimum amount of pay, and how to minimize turnover as much as possible. So whenever you're working for a corporation, they will do a lot of communication involving how you're part of a team, and, you know, it's a family, and how there's opportunity in the company. And, you know, when you're working for humans, which is what I've usually done, you know, it's, you don't get those emails. You don't go, hey, Russ, well, you're part of a team here, and we really value you. Can you do this gig on Friday? I have one company I work for. I'm a tour guide. I have one company I work for that the guy comes out of Wall Street and started a tour company, and they're like that. They're like that. They, as soon as it goes corporate, they're the only ones where I'm not an independent contractor. I'm an employee. I mean, but there's some advantage to that for them, because they assign you work the same way that an independent contracting company would. For whatever reason, there must be a tax advantage. They're defining you as an employee. And you get that. The corporate structures are sociopathic and inherently inhumane. That's what's creepy about being inside of them, because you can tell that this company is designed to extract your life as profitably as possible.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the behavioral scientist. I just finished reading on my channel Dirty Truths by Michael Parenti. If you guys would like, you guys can go into, you know, the playlist tab and go under that. But under this part is called political science fiction. This part right here, it talks about how behavioral scientists are really tools used by capitalists to keep people in line so that they continuously consume over and over and over. And I'm telling you, Parenti breaks it down, but that is really part of it. And a lot of times people will talk about, oh, well, we have to obey the science. But is the science capitulating to capital? Is the science capitulating to the whims of the people who are in power instead of just to the service of people? That's a question that a lot of people don't want to ask. And then you start to get into healthcare, mental health care. Are we actually being made to cope with a system that is bad for us? So they're saying, oh, you need these type of medications just so you can cope with the system, versus this is just naturally what's wrong with you. And so then it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And even I was listening to a lecture by Dr. Gabor Mate, where he was talking about how capitalism's actually terrible for your mental health. And
I've seen a few interviews with him on that. Yep, great.
Oh man! So it just goes to show where these corporations are basically there to turn you into a machine. It's really to, I'm going to make up a word, androidize you into, or mechanize you into something that doesn't need food, sleep, shelter. You don't need any type of, your hopes and dreams and fulfillment. You don't need any of that. All you need to do is work for us and produce for us, and you're good. So that's basically what it feels like.
Well, and they understand that humans feel a need for connection. That's why they throw out that kind of language. You're part of a team. You're part of a family. We welcome you here. And also, if you have a society whose economy is dependent on consumerism, well, what do you want? You want a society of infants. You want to infantilize people, because who lacks control of their impulses? Children.
Yeah.
You don't want people to really mature and become self-aware, strong, confident adults. You want them to be like children. Who looks at something on TV and goes, I got to have that. I got to have it. A 12-year-old. They want you to perpetually think like a 12-year-old.